good to finally talk to you.
I know, right?
Yeah, I think you were one of the first people that talked to me on the Discord. It was either you or Luke, I think. One of the,
Oh, really?
yeah, I think so. Because I think it was you sent me, I think when I first got on there, I can't remember what I was talking about. I think it was something to do with mercy, and you sent me this article. I think it might have actually been by George MacDonald. I don't remember now, but it was something about
Or was it
justice.
justice?
Yeah,
Justice
about
sermon.
justice. Yeah. Yeah. So I remember that. Yeah.
I know I was on a bit of a justice sermon kick there for a while. Every time someone mentioned anything, I was sending them the justice sermon.
It was good.
They open their mouth. No, I'm just kidding.
It was really good though. That was George MacDonald though? Because I didn't even.
Yeah, that was George MacDonald from the Unspoken Sermons.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually Luke sent it to me. It was
really?
Luke that sent it to me the first time.
That's fun.
And I remember reading it. I read it through and I knew it was really important. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to read it again, but I'm going to read it out loud. And I sat outside on my porch and I read it out loud. And I must have wept like 5 times during that reading.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
there was something about reading it out loud that was just so powerful, you know?
Yeah. Do you normally do that, read out loud? Or?
If I really want to understand something, I have to. Yeah.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way. I have to.
I have to, yeah. Yeah. Especially if I find myself going, like, reading the same line like 4 times. I'm like, okay, wait, stop. Let's do this out loud. And then it kind of gets me back on track, you know, unless, of course, it's like a page turner thriller novel or something. And then I'm, you know, I'm not necessarily, yeah. But I knew I knew I needed to read the justice sermon out loud. It was one of those things.
Yeah, his stuff is kind of, it's a little, the way, I don't know. I mean, sometimes it's easy for me to read what he writes, and then other times it's kind of hard. I don't know. That the first chapter, that's all I've gotten through was the child. Was it? I think it was
Child in the Mist.
Yeah, Child in the Mist.
Child in the Mist.
Yeah, and so I read that whole thing out loud to myself, and I go through and I have a highlighter too because I think that helps me focus, like when I'm like, I can go through. But there were some parts where I got kind of lost, and I was like, I'm not sure what he's saying here, but.
Yeah, well, you know, actually, there is an online link. I might have to just jump for a minute, and then my husband still didn't come in, so I have to let him know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because he'll be looking for me. That's all. He'll just be like, "It's dinner time, and where is she? And where's my dinner?" So, anyway, this online, I think it's called Online Literature or something, and they feature all of George MacDonald's sermons, and they have that sermon written as Child in the Mist. And I thought that they made, yeah, hang on a second.
Okay.
Hang on just 1 minute. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's fine. That was fast.
Yeah. So anyway, I was talking about that child. Yeah, so I thought that they made like a typo and they wrote Child in the Mist instead of Child in the Midst. And then I watched a conversation with 3 MacDonald scholars, and apparently it is Child in the Mist.
In the Mist. Okay.
In the Mist.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's an order of enlightenment to the unspoken sermons. So the first one is Child in the Mist.
Okay. So
yeah.
why is he? Is there a reason he does them in a certain order, or?
Well, he's taking you on some kind of journey of, yeah. And that's where you're starting. You're starting as a child in the mist.
Yeah.
According to George, anyway. It does, yeah. I just finished listening to The Wise Woman. And there were a few times in there that he just made me laugh. Wait, I'm going to grab the book. I've had this book for years, and when I started reading it, I realized I stole it from a church library. Like, oh my goodness, I never gave that back. Oh, anyways, at the very end of the story, and I'm not giving anything away, but I mean, I am giving away the end, but this is just his humor. He says, and that is all my double story. How double it is, if you care to know, you must find out. If you think it is not finished, I never knew a story that was.
I remember that now. I read that one.
I could tell you a great deal more concerning them all, but I've already told you more than is good for those who read, but with their foreheads, and enough for those whom it has made look a little solemn and sigh as they close the book. I was just like, oh, I love that. It just makes him so alive, those little things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love his writing. Have you read all his short stories? Or?
No. I've read, The Light Princess. And I read, I just finished this one, and Lilith and Phantastes.
Okay.
And then a number of the unspoken sermons, but that's all I've read so far.
Do you have a favorite?
Oh man. I think it's Phantastes.
Same here. Yeah. That one.
I mean, I love Lilith. Lilith is profound. It's profound. But there's something about Phantastes that is just, I don't know, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's my favorite as well. I think my favorite short story is The Golden Key. That one.
Yeah, I haven't read that one yet.
I think you'd like that one. It's very easy read too. It's written for probably a younger audience or something, I guess. But it's I don't know. It's every time I read that story, I usually end up crying because I don't know. It's just
you end up crying.
Yeah, usually every time. Same thing with Phantastes. There's parts in Phantastes where I'll end up like.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I was when I got Phantastes on Audible, and then I got it on Kindle, and then I got a hard copy of it. So you know how much I like it. I have with Phantastes wherever I go, and I listened to it while I was turning my compost, and that was last spring, late spring, and it's a good 5-hour job. It's a big job, and I have a gander who always takes the top of the compost, and he's kind of the supervisor, like an actual goose. So he stands on top of my compost while I work and keeps an eye out. And every now and then I'd just have to stop working and cry, listening to this story. And the goose would come down, slide down the compost, and walk up to me and be like, get back to work. Get back to work. If you're not working, you have to leave. That was his deal.
That's funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess we planned on talking about I asked you if you want to talk about the Child in the Mist, I guess. What your thoughts were on that and his idea of childlikeness and everything. Do you want to get into that?
Yeah.
Or do you want to share some of your personal testimony and stories or whatever?
Oh, no, we can talk about Child in the Mist. let me see. I just want to open it up here because it's been a while since I read it, and I just have to remind myself of what I read.
It just seems like I've listened to your you and Nate Heil, I think, on the Grail Country, because I just found his channel recently. Well,
right.
And so I was burning through those, and it seems like I pick up on little hints where it's like you'll drop some stuff that's like you can tell it's kind of that you believe the same things, I guess, as that like the childlikeness is kind of like it seems like he's saying it's the divine ideal, basically. And
yeah, what I find about, well, you know, what is so fascinating about Child in the Mist is it's not so much that, you know, you would, the assumption that you make when you first go to read it is that it's going to be about you, but it's actually about God. Yeah. Right? And that the childlikeness is God's. Yeah. God is childlike. And that's the fascinating bit to this sermon, I find. I'm not sure exactly what you want to talk about, but I think it's the best description of the simplicity of God, because the childlikeness that he describes is a singleness, right? A simplicity to God. It's not necessarily that God is like naive or inexperienced or any of those things, because we often immediately equate that to childhood, right? But childlikeness is not the same as childishness, according to George.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Did you make any observations about that?
Yeah, I think I don't even know if it's in that one. It might be in Phantastes, or it was some other book where he makes that distinction between childlikeness and childish. Maybe it was in Lilith. When he's talking about the little ones, I can't remember, but
probably, yeah.
Yeah, but he does say one thing he did say was that let's see, for it must be confessed that there are children who are not childlike. One of the saddest and not least common sights in the world is the face of a child whose mind is so brimful of worldly wisdom that the human childishness has vanished from it, and as well as the divine childlikeness.
Right.
Yeah. So there's it's kind of like Peter Pan is more childish than childlike. Well, he's both, but you know he wrestles with he acts childish in a lot of ways. In that.
Yeah. And it could also, I don't know, I'm just thinking about it now, but it could also be, I have a feeling that it's fairly aligned with his idea of fancy and imagination. I don't know if you're aware of his thoughts on imagination.
No.
George MacDonald? Oh, I'll have to send you, we don't have to talk about it now, but I'll send you a couple of essays that he wrote about imagination. And he does make a distinction, and he takes that distinction actually from Coleridge, apparently, that there's a difference between fancy and imagination. So if you see a child leaning towards fancy, then you need to correct them, is basically what he says in the essay, and bring them back into the imagination, because the imagination to George is divine, in the sense that we move within the imagination of God. So that's how he sees it. It's nested, right? And he makes a really good point when he talks about if God wants to make a drama, he makes a Shakespeare, right? He makes the person.
Okay.
He doesn't just write the story.
Yeah.
He actually makes the person, and the person is not an actor. They are the story, right? It's about being. And I'll send you the essays. One's called The Fantastic Imagination. It's just a short one.
Yeah.
He wrote that one for educators. Actually, he wrote both of them for educators, but the other one is called The Imagination, and it's I mean, I've mined things out of there for at least 3 years.
Yeah, can you say more about that? I'm really interested
in the imagination.
Oh yeah. I don't know. That's a really interesting idea. That so, and what you said about when God makes that's the story, He makes a person. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I can read you the quote. I'll read you the quote. Let me just find it here. Okay, so I don't know what I did with my reading glasses now. Okay, so he says, it's a lot, like it's it's a lot. It's jam-packed, this essay. As to what thought is in the mind of God before it takes form, or what the form is to him before he utters it. In a word, what the consciousness of God is in either case, all we can say is that our consciousness in the resembling conditions must, afar off, resemble his. But when we come to consider the acts embodying the divine thought, and then in brackets he has, if indeed thought and act be not one and the same with God, then we enter a region of large difference. We discover at once, for instance, that where a man would make a machine or a picture or a book, God makes the man that makes the book or the picture or the machine. Would God give us drama? He makes a Shakespeare. Or would he construct a drama more immediately his own? He begins with the building of the stage itself, and that stage is a world, a universe of worlds. He makes the actors, and they do not act. They are their part, which is the being part, the being thing, right? Yeah. He utters them into the visible to work out their life, his drama. When he would have an epic, he sends a thinking hero into his drama, and the epic is the soliloquy of his Hamlet. Instead of writing his lyrics, he sets birds and his maidens a-singing. All the process, and I love this part, all the processes of the ages are God's science. All the flow of history is his poetry. His sculpture is not in marble, but in living and speech-giving forms which pass away, not to yield place to those that come after, but to be perfected in a nobler studio. What he has done remains, although it vanishes. And he never either forgets what he has once done, or does it even once again. That idea comes forth in almost all of his stories, where you can never do the same thing twice. Does that ring a bell? Like in Lilith, in The Wise Woman, in Phantastes, because we like to say, oh, let's do it again. And a character in the story will always, the wise character in the story, whoever it might be, like the raven or the wise woman, will say something like, well, like she has a house with many rooms in it, right? But you can never go into the same room more than once, so you can never have an experience more than once, because no two things are ever the same to George MacDonald, right? What else is it here? Interesting. As the thoughts move in the mind of a man, so move the worlds of men and women in the mind of God. And make no confusion there, for there they had their birth, the offspring of his imagination. Man is but a thought of God. I know, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. It's a lot. I'm gonna copy and send it to you in the Discord so you have it.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Yeah, he gives you a lot to chew on. I don't know.
Yeah.
Got it.
I mean, basically just in that little bit there, he says that for God, thought and act are one and the same thing. God doesn't think and then act. When God thinks, something happens. Okay. Right? They're both the same. They're both the same.
Yeah.
And that we as co-creators, we make things, but God makes persons, right? And those persons make the things, but it's all part of this story that he's telling. It's the stage, right? And that stage is not just the world, but it's a universe of worlds. Like for George, it's cosmic. It's not just here, but it's everything. It's all of the cosmos. Yeah. And and then I love, like at this part that I love, all the processes of the ages are God's science. All the flow of history is his poetry. It's beautiful.
I know, I'm trying to keep up. He makes those statements and I'm trying to process them as you're saying. Yeah, it is very beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
The way he words things too, the way he sees everything too. It's like he has this, I guess, you'd say bird's eye view, but it's even bigger than that. He just steps back, like you said, just sees almost can see the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's in a beautiful way too, because it's what's that term I've heard you use before, ultimate reconciliation or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's like, was that in the Justice sermon you sent me a long time ago?
Well, he doesn't talk about it directly there. He talks about it in the consuming fire, which you're headed straight for.
Okay.
Let me see which one is that. I think that might even be next.
Yeah, that is.
It's the next one. So you'll hear all about it.
Okay.
In the next one.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that?
And
is that because when I've heard you use that term before, and then I didn't know if that was a little different than universalism.
No, well, I don't like using the term universalism because I think it carries a lot of baggage. Mm-hmm. The Greek word is apokatastasis, and it means the ultimate reconciliation of all things. Mm-hmm. And it was something that, I'm not a historian, but as far as I understand, most of the early church was under the impression that that's how God was going to deal with the fall and sin and all those things. And so, and you'll find out in the consuming fire sermon that it doesn't exclude hell. Hell is not excluded from the ultimate reconciliation of all things. But it is like, and George uses this imagery as well in all of his fairy tales. Even like in The Wise Woman, there's a scene where Rosamond is, feels the love and the warmth of the wise woman, whereas the other little girl, Agnes, experiences it as a fire, a burning, right?
That's like, remember that,
yeah, that's like 10 times hotter. Well, that's the premise there, is that the love of God is a fire, right? And to those who are, ready to, I don't know how to even put it. For those people who have, let me say it like this, eyes to see and ears to hear, right? Who are open, they experience it as love. And to those who want to hang on and possess whatever it is that they think that they need to have, it's experienced as fire. And so all that imagery in mostly in the New Testament of, the burning off of wheat, of the stubble and the hay and all that, kind of thing.
Yeah.
George MacDonald would say that is what the love of God does. It burns away all that dross, right? The impurities and the things that can be shaken. The verse, all nothing that can't be, how does that go? It's just dropped out of my head.
It's in Hebrews somewhere. It's like the removal of like whatever can be shaken, the things that can't be shaken, remain or something.
Remain, exactly. Yeah.
Remind me, there's a it says, set me in Song of Solomon, set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love is as strong as death, jealousy as cruel as the grave. Its flames are a flame of fire, a most vehement flame. And then this actually has a note, and it says at the bottom, a most vehement flame of Yahweh, or Yah, a poetic form of Yahweh, I guess.
Oh yeah, so, interesting.
Yeah, that his.
What's that? What's that verse? I gotta write that down.
Oh, that is Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verse 6. But yeah, it says, I think it says in Hebrews as well that God indeed is a consuming fire. Like, yeah, I guess.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
That's. I think that's actually the verse that he begins with.
Okay.
Because he starts every sermon with a verse, and then he elaborates on it.
It's kind of weird to go from it goes from childlikeness, and I remember reading it, and it's like, all this stuff, and then right at the end, it goes into like this burning fire. You're like, wait, what's happening? Like it sounds like all nice about children, and then you're like, oh, now we're going into this burning flame, getting the.
But actually, if you think about it, that is the simplicity of God, right? I believe it's in this sermon. Let me see here, my notes. It's one of my favorite. I think it's in this sermon. Actually, I'll just look for it. Oh, okay. It's in the consuming fire. It's in this. It's the second paragraph of the consuming fire, but it's. Okay. I'll just read it. For love loves unto purity. I've read this so many times on the internet. People are like, "Oh, not that again."
No, I haven't. So.
For love loves unto purity. Love has ever in view the absolute loveliness of that which it beholds. Where loveliness is incomplete and love cannot love its fill of loving, it spends itself to make more lovely, that it may love more. It strives for perfection, even that itself may be perfected, not in itself, but in the object. And to me, that is the absolute simplicity of God, right? Yeah. And so that's why the consuming fire hangs right on the end of the child in the mist, because the childlikeness of God, like if you go back,
here it is, like right at the end. I highlighted this. It's at the end of the childlikeness part, and it says, "For love itself will, for love's sake, turn the countenance away from that which is not lovely, and he will have to read, written upon the dark wall of his imprisoned conscience, the words awful and glorious, our God is a consuming fire."
Right. Yeah. But then there's also, I don't know what page it is because I have it on my Kindle here, but in the Child in the Mist, he says, "In this then is God like the child, that he is simply and altogether our friend, our father, our more than friend, father and mother, our infinite love, perfect God."
I remember that part.
With him all is simplicity of purpose and meaning and effort and end. Namely, that we should be as he is, think the same thoughts, mean the same things, possess the same blessedness. So to me, that second paragraph of the second sermon is basically elaborating on what that means. It means that love loves unto purity, right? That love has no choice. Yeah. It can't do anything else. It doesn't choose to love unto purity. It does. That's what it does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And this was the thing that really impacted me, because I realized that we think, or we grow up often with the idea that, God can choose one over the other, or that God can choose to forgive. And I know that that's hot. What I just said was like, people are like, well, doesn't he? Well, didn't Jesus? Well, did he? If love loves unto purity, did he choose to do that? Or did he have to? And I think he had to. I don't think he had a choice. And Maximus the Confessor would say he didn't have the ability to choose. Right? Christ didn't have the ability to choose, because if he could have chosen, he would have wavered, and he was sinless. Right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great. Heavy stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. So you've read all of these, though? You've been through all the sermons?
I haven't read them all yet. No.
Okay, yeah.
I got to, where did I get to? Let me see my table of contents here. The cause of spiritual stupidity. I haven't, that's where I got to. When I stopped, I was afraid to read it.
That sounds like a good one. Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if I can read that. Maybe I'm one of those people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I really like, I love this chapter about the childlike, though, that he goes through and he, I don't know, he makes a lot of different cases, but then he comes to the end part, like you said, it's coming to the main point he wants to get to, that God is childlike. But I also like the point where he goes through and he says, at first he starts it out with saying, like, it could have even been Peter's child, which just like a common child, not a rich child or a poor child, just one. But I just like that it could have been, like, Peter's the one that says something, and then it could be Peter's child, in the fact that, I think I've said this to someone recently. I was just like, when you have a kid, it's like, it's literally yourself again in the flesh. Like, you get to see yourself in the garden again, like in this
exactly.
innocent form. Yeah. And so it's right there in front of us, like, all the time, of
it is
the aim we're trying to get back to, that childlike state. It's like you have a child, and then there you are again in the garden.
And when you think about it, like, children are also they're very much within their imagination, right? Like, small children, they live inside their imagination. Like, I've put it this way, in that, you know, when a child is outside, the child can fly, right? He can be a superhero. Somebody posted a meme the other day, something like, I wish I had as much courage as a 4-year-old with a Batman cape on, you know? And right away, you can see that little kid, right? Who's just like so convinced that he's Batman, you know? I have a little nephew, and he loves Spider-Man. And he does the, you know, the thing, right? Where Spider-Man sends the webs out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Joseph, show me what Spider-Man does. You know, he's like 3, and he does it. And he is Spider-Man when he does it. He's totally Spider-Man, right? Yeah. Like, there's no question in his mind who he is when he does that. Yeah. And yet nothing happens. Nothing at all, right? And this is the child. The child is completely immersed in being, right? They're in full participation within being itself. They are whatever they imagine, right? They, you know, you can say to a child, what does can you be a tree? They can be a tree.
Yeah, they would say yes. Watch.
They can be one.
Yeah.
You know, that they could just go, or like this, and then in their mind they are the tree. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think that there's an element of that to the idea of childlikeness too. Not childishness, but childlikeness.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I really like that he makes that distinction. That's because it's like you grow into childlikeness. There's the part in what is it, where Jesus says, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. I think he even mentions that briefly in here too. And when I used to always think of perfect as like sinless, or like just being completely righteous or whatever. But then if you actually like read it, he's talking in Luke. He says, actually be merciful as your Father in heaven is merciful. And it's kind of like this growing into perfection or into completeness, where you're kind of getting back to this childlike state, the state of innocence, where you're merciful. It's I bring this up all the time, but I always bring up the Fox and the Hound movie. Have you seen that Disney movie? Yeah. And so it's kind of like that whole story. They start out in the garden as children, and then they grow up and they leave the garden and they start getting all this conflict. And then at the end, they kind of have to come into this reconciliation and forgiveness and see each other back how they used to see each other as friends and playmates.
Right.
And so it's kind of this growth back to, a childlike state where they're not childish. They're not just running around splashing each other, but they are childlike in a way. They come back to this.
Yeah, and they've experienced some kind of interpersonal conflict, but if they can resolve it, if they can be reconciled, then the childlikeness that they reestablish, right, is a childlikeness in which all that wood, hay, and stubble has been burned off. Like, think about it. It is a reconciliation, right? Like this idea of a Phantastes, or the reconciliation of all things. It's not just like an end times idea. It's fractal, because everything in Scripture is fractal, right? So you see this happening in the smallest forms, and it carries that. That's because I think, because God's telling the same story. He's telling the same story over and over and over and over. This is how it's done. This is what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
And of course, it's all wrapped up in love. It's all about love, and love in the sense that love cannot just exist on its own. Love has to love something. It has to have a focus of attention. It's relational, right? And then out of love emerges something new. So even the family is a representation, right, of this principle that that love loves something, and those two somethings that are in love, out of them emerges something else, right? It can be a child, but it can also be who they are, right? Nothing remains the same when two things come into a loving relationship with each other. Something new always emerges, right? It always does.
New creation, new heavens, new earth.
And
in small ways, like you're saying, in big ways and in small ways.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, because it was actually my younger sister just literally had her first child today.
Oh, really? Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. So, but I mentioned it to my other cousin. I was saying how that it is kind of this attention of love too, where I was saying their life is literally like with that new creation of the child, there is like a new heavens and a new earth for them, because their whole life is gonna, like, when that child's gonna have to have attention, and so it's gonna, almost like gravity works in pulling matter together, like it's gonna reorient everything around them, and they're gonna have a new heavens and a new earth around that new life.
Oh yeah. And everything and everything old will become new.
Yeah, that's cool.
Right?
Yeah. That's true.
Like, this is the beauty of like of God, and the fractal way that, when Christ speaks, when he says, behold, I make all things new, he does because he is love, right? God is love.
Yeah.
And that's what he shows us. He shows us that. And that's what love does. Love loves unto purity, and that which is not lovely, he makes more lovely, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that's why George MacDonald can say, you know, in the wise woman story that the wise woman has many rooms in her home, but you can only go into them once, because you're never the same.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
you're never the same.
That's true. I need to read that story again. It's been a while since I read that one. I read all of those last year because you sent me that article, and then I heard Luke mention Lilith a few times, and he would always say Lilith is a trip, and so I was just kept thinking, well, I won't be able to understand it, so I didn't touch it for a while. And then Christian Golden, I don't know if you've ever spoken. He's on the Discord server sometimes.
Yeah, I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, he told me to pick up I can't remember the book. I think he just said he was recommending it for someone else, a friend of mine. He was like, you should give her some George MacDonald. I think she'd like it. And so then I found Phantastes at a used bookstore, and then I read it myself instead. And then I was like, what's going on? I need to read more of this stuff. So then after that, I read Lilith, and then I read like all of his short stories. And Lilith is fun. Yeah. Lilith has kind of even related to this. He has the little ones in that. And I remember there was one statement he made that I really loved. Is he said, I think it was Lola, or Luna, I can't remember.
Lola, I think. Lola.
Yeah, and he says she was, I think, full of wisdom but empty of knowledge or something like that. That was a statement I thought was so cool. Where it's like that you don't.
I know.
Yeah.
You know, when I open up Lilith in my Kindle and I go to my highlighted quotes, just that section of the Kindle, sometimes I do it just because when I read them, I can't believe that anyone could think of those things to write. Like they're so profound, most of them, I'll just read through the highlighted quotes, just the quotes that I highlighted in the story, I'm just like, oh my God, how does anyone do that? Like, it's just crazy.
I don't know. And he weaves it all together too. That thing with Lilith, it really is a trip. Like, I don't know how else to describe it other than the way Luke does. Because the first time I read it, I remember thinking probably two-thirds of the book, I didn't really know what was going on. Like, you're really getting into it and you love it. And he's got these really profound statements, but then one chapter, you're like, I'm not sure how this even relates to this other one. And then there's the chapter with the white leech, and I'm like, what is this? But then like about 2/3 through the book, it's like he just takes the thread and just weaves it all together, and you're just like,
I know,
it's beautiful. I don't know how he does it.
I know. And I mean, like that one conversation that I saw between those three guys. One of them was the guy that wrote The Shack. What's his name? Paul Young.
Okay.
And anyway, they were just saying that they read George MacDonald over and over and over, and every time they read him, they get something else from it, because it depends on where you're standing, right, in your life. Like,
it definitely does. Like, Phantastes is the same way. The first time I read it, there's one chapter I just was in love with, and next time I read it, it was like a different chapter I was just so drawn to. I carry that book with me all the time.
Do you?
Yeah, I got it right here. I got a little pocket version.
Nice.
Yeah, because I think I read that one 4 times last year, because
wow.
It was almost like a lifesaver for me in a way, because it came at like a time when I needed it, and it was just, I don't think it was just an escape. Like, you could say it was an escape to kind of go off and like open a book and escape into the book, escape from reality. But I don't think it was more opening up this reality for me, rather than running off into another one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No. It actually is more real.
Yeah. It really
Phantastes. Yeah. And that's what it shows you, that what you're living in is not really the real, like your everyday, somehow it's the unenchanted, let's put it that way. The unenchanted is not real, right? The enchanted is the real.
Yeah, there's a part in there I love when he goes to the, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, where he goes to the part, it's the part where he goes and there's a little girl and the father comes and the father's like rationally minded and stuff. And so he's talking to the father for a minute and then he says he didn't believe in fairyland. And then he looks at the little girl again. He's like, I believed in fairyland again. Or something like that. I'll have to find out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, read it. I don't remember that for some reason.
Oh no, that's a weird part in the mirror. Yeah, I'll have to find it. I can't remember exactly where it is. I think it was.
Must be in the beginning, no?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's before he finds his shadow. Where he finds the ogre or whatever. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, it's got to be before that because that's where he broke the. Okay, so here it is. I think. Yeah, so he found some sort of house. Let's see. In half an hour, I heard a heavy step approach. I'll just read the paragraph. Okay.
Yeah.
In half an hour, I heard a heavy step approach and enter the house. A jolly voice whose slight huskiness appeared to proceed from overmuch laughter called out, Betsy, the pig's trough is quite empty, and that is a pity. Let them swill, lass. They're of no use but to get fat. Ha ha ha. Gluttony is forbidden in their commandments. Ha ha ha. The very voice, kind of jovial, seemed to disrobe the room of the strange look which all new places wear, to disenchant it out of the realm of the ideal into that of the actual. I just love that line. To disenchant it out of the realm of the ideal into that of the actual. It began to look as if I had known every corner of it for 20 years, and when, soon after, the dame came and fetched me to partake of their early supper, the grasp of his great hand and the harvest moon on his benevolent face, which was needed to light up the rotundity of the globe beneath it, produced such a reaction in me that for a moment I could hardly believe that there was a fairyland, and that all I had passed through since I left home had not been the wandering dream of a diseased imagination, operating on a too mobile frame, not merely causing me indeed to travel, but peopling for me with vague phantoms the regions through which my actual steps had led me. But the next moment my eye fell upon a little girl who was sitting in the chimney corner with a little book open on her knee, from which she had apparently just looked up to fix great inquiring eyes upon me. I believed in fairyland again.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, because that's where she was, right?
Yeah. And imagination, like you talked about, and how that's actually more. It's far more real than we ever give it credit for.
Yeah.
Even like I was talking to my cousin, I think this past weekend, and I was telling him how last year I had been praying. I started the year by praying to God that He would speak to me more through my imagination and stuff like that. And then I was just telling him that I discovered like I can't really control my imagination like I would want to. It's hard to describe. Like I can't just. There would be times when I was telling him I could like actually picture my dog or something. Like I could picture her very clearly in my imagination, but I couldn't just do it like on a whim or something. Like it wasn't just like a fancy like you're talking about. Like I couldn't.
Right.
It was. It's hard to describe. I don't know. Well,
I think the interesting thing about the way George MacDonald thinks about the imagination, and I recently watched a conversation with Rod Dreher and Paul Vanderklay and some other guy, Kale something. And they were talking about reenchantment, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've heard the phrase reenchant the world, and stuff. And I, honestly, I thought that would be nice. That was but after reading as much George MacDonald as I have and other authors, I realized that the world actually is enchanted and we just don't see it, right? And that is what Phantastes is all about, is that the world is enchanted. Like one of the favorite parts in Phantastes for me is when he's going down the road and his shadow is following him. And, his shadow kind of is autonomous, right? Like it moves at its own, does whatever it wants. And he sees this little fairy boy on the side of the road, with these magical things in his hands, right? And then the shadow passes over the boy, and suddenly he's just a little boy with a straw hat and some broken toys, right?
Yeah.
And to me, what he's saying there is that it's that shadow that we go and get, right? It's through an action of our own that we end up with the shadow.
Yeah.
And the shadow functions independently of us, and it disenchants the world, right? That's what it does. And so I don't want to go too deep, but I mean, there's a lot of the people that influenced George MacDonald, or that he liked to read, Novalis and Goethe and people like that, they saw the world as enchanted, and Goethe was able to use that way of seeing the world to actually decipher things scientifically. So he has a theory of color. He also has he wrote a poem called The Metamorphosis of Plants. You can Google that. Goethe, Metamorphosis of Plants. And it was through contemplating a plant that he realized that flowers were actually leaves, that process, that botanical scientific process that the flower goes through, out of that same organism, it can either make a leaf or a flower, right? So, and I guess it was like 50 years later that a botanist actually discovered that was true. But the discovery is actually credited to Goethe because he realized it first. And he realized it because he saw the world as enchanted, okay? And he took the time to contemplate. And the thing is, the way I would understand that is that Goethe sees the world as a whole. Though everything is part of one thing. Okay. And so it's top down for Goethe. It's not bottom up. Okay. And I think if you see the world that way, then the world is enchanted. It's I don't know if I'm saying this in a very good way.
I know what you mean. Sometimes it's hard to find the language.
Yeah.
So top down as in that when the
it's really the one. It's the one and the many. It's the one and the many. It's the problem of the one and the many, right? So you have unity and multiplicity in the world. And we get caught up within the multiplicity, which is, you don't see the forest for the trees, that old cliche, right? So we're in the trees and we can't see the forest. We don't have that 30,000 foot view, so to speak. But we can have it, we can transcend it if we realize that it is God in whom we live and move and have our being, right? So all of this is the one. Okay. Yeah. And Jesus uses that same language and that same idea when he talks about, or Paul, when he talks about Jesus as being the head and we are the body. Yeah. That's the same language. That's the one in the many, right? The unity and the multiplicity. So
can I ask, how does that, with going back to the flower, how does that tie in exactly with the flower and the leaf?
Because Goethe doesn't see them as separate.
Okay.
So what he observes is that the leaf becomes the flower. It doesn't, but it's still the same thing, if that makes any sense, right?
trying to track with it.
Well, you have this, what's the word I want to, you have this process in which the leaf becomes the leaf, or the leaf becomes the flower.
Okay. I think I'm really trying to because they're all from God. Is that what?
No, because the plant is you see it's a whole being, right?
Okay.
It's oh man, I'm gonna have a really difficult. It's not that I don't understand it, I just don't know how to say it.
Yeah. Well, test it on me. Keep trying. So you'll get the right language.
I should think about how to articulate this. Like, for many years, I didn't. When I first joined the Discord, a large part of the reason why I was so engaged was because I was learning to articulate a lot of my own ideas. Because I never talked to anybody about anything that I thought about ever. And when you don't talk about it, you don't learn to articulate it, right? And then you say things like, well, now it's a flower, so it's fine, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to get there, and it's just not like I know exactly what you mean, though. I know I've had that happen before, where something clicks and it's so clear in your head, but I cannot find the language for it.
Well, okay, let's just use my hand as an example.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So let's say when my fingers are together, it's a leaf.
Yeah,
and when my fingers are open, it's a flower.
Yeah. Okay.
It's still the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right? It's still. Does that make any sense?
It's making more sense, I think, because it's all coming from the same being, is what you're saying.
It comes from the same being. That's exactly right. It emerges from the same being, right? And oh, hang on a minute. This might help me actually. Let me just look if I have it here. Oops, it's here. Oh shoot, I don't have anything. Crap, I didn't save that.
Sure. I have a feeling it's gonna click even clearer. Like once we're done talking, I'm gonna be like, oh, now I get it perfectly. But I think I'm starting to get there. I think I understand.
It's a holistic way of seeing the world, that everything is connected.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So the flower is not unlike the leaf. The flower actually is the leaf. Okay. So we want to make distinctions. We want to put things, we want to say that the flower is the flower, the leaf is the leaf. Those are two distinct things. And Goethe says, no, they're not. They're actually the same thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And so it's a holistic approach to science for Goethe, because that's where he applied it, but also to poetry and philosophy. But see, he sees all those things as connected anyways. Yeah. Science is poetry, science is philosophy, philosophy is science, and like it's all one thing. And it's not all one thing in a Buddhist way where that all one thing becomes nothing. It's all one thing, which is everything, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a feeling this is going to be extremely helpful for me. I don't know, you're saying things and I'm like, I feel like this is very important and I need to understand this clearly. And I feel like it's related to something I don't know if you saw. You probably didn't see it. I sent it to Luke, I think, but I started seeing something about the Star of David and the Trinity pattern in the Star of David. And for some reason, I feel like it might kind of be connected to that. But I just show you the pic, because I kept thinking of like the Trinity, that like a triangle and stuff, and so like the Trinity is like unifying two.
Yeah.
Because you have two things and they're separate, and so you need a third to like unify them. And so I kept thinking like, well, you could have a husband and a wife, and they're united under God or something, and then they have a child, and so the child kind of holds them together. So I kept seeing the diamond, and then I realized it was just the Star of David if you just put the two triangles on top of each other.
Yes, exactly.
But then I was like, I drew it out and there was, I don't know if you can see it. And so it was like, I started doing the other little Star of David. So it was like, kind of like they're all connected and it just keeps ever expanding out into, I don't know if it's related to what you're saying, but it's like all connected into one and it's all.
Well, it's fractal.
Yeah.
It's fractal. And that is what you end up seeing, right? Is that it just goes on and on and on, all these patterns.
Yeah.
And whatever pattern it is, it doesn't really matter what the pattern is. It's the repetition of the pattern, I think. I mean, to me anyway. The repetition of these patterns they're telling a story. I mean, a story is a pattern, right?
Yeah.
And you see that in George MacDonald's stories, for example. Like, you know, there's a pattern to the story. Like with Lilith, for 2/3 of the book, you can't figure out the pattern.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it all falls into place, right?
Yeah.
And when that happens, that's actually you seeing the pattern. When the puzzle pieces start to fit together, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I find really interesting is that we actually are pattern seeking creatures. Like we're actually made to find patterns.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks volumes. I mean, some people would turn that around and say, well, that you just see patterns everywhere then, right? But I would say, so what? That's what I would say. Maybe there are patterns everywhere. And I do think there are patterns everywhere. And I think that is how God speaks to us initially, through pattern, right?
Yeah.
Because it catches your attention. Yeah.
Would you say like patterns of being as well? Would that be a good way of saying too, or no? Like even, I was thinking.
Well, they're existential patterns, right? Like we have a sense, even just with the 4 seasons, we have a sense of death, we have a sense of birth. Yeah. We have a sense of resurrection, in the spring. So, yeah.
Yeah, I could. So is this kind of related where you would say the leaf is the flower, you would say death is life?
Yeah.
Make that okay. I think I'm starting to track a little more too. And then Lilith, it's like the leech is Lilith. It's like they're the same. Yeah. But you don't see that at first till you start to see the puzzle and the patterns start to click together, and you're like, oh, that's what.
And that's also really interesting because there's also this idea that you have these inversions, right? To the way you think, which, in Phantastes, there's a fantastic story of, I don't know if you remember the little girl collecting butterfly wings.
Yeah.
Okay. And she's being attacked by these invisible monsters, and the knight is with her, and he's kind of swinging wildly in the air because he can't see them, right? And when he hits one, it suddenly appears. As soon as he hits it, he can see it. And it's a wooden man-shaped thing, right? And so he starts to hack at it, and it splinters, and all the splinters turn into more of him. So he realizes, well, he can't do that. So after several various attempts at getting rid of these things, he finally finds out that if he stands them up again on their heads and leans them on a tree, that they can't move. Okay. Now, what I don't want to be really explicit about it because I think it's really fun to find out for yourself, but what he's saying there is that for some people, the only way to stop them in their tracks, the only way to stop them from just making more of themselves in the world, is to show them something from an inverted angle. right?
Yeah.
Because that's actually how the world, and that stops them, right? These kinds of people, it's a certain kind of person, and they can't move because they've never seen the world upside down before. Okay, they've never seen that. But that's really what it is, right?
Yeah, yeah. That reminds me of that verse in Acts where it says like these people like preaching the gospel have turned the world upside down or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it. Yeah. Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, that, I said that in connection to you saying death is life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And how is that? How is that true? Like, how is death life?
It's a baptism. It's a door. It's the resurrection. It's it's the flower going to seed and then coming back. The grain falling into the ground and coming back new. It's
right.
Like you said, it's not going into the same room twice. It's like a new room. It's a new door. It's not the same. The seed goes in the ground. It doesn't come up the same seed. It comes up something new. But
right. And that happens to us every single day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Because the present moment is actually the only real thing that we have is right now. Like the past doesn't exist and the future doesn't exist. Right. And so we live in this moment, and we're constantly shedding off something, right? We're constantly dying.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at biologically, we're shedding off skin cells and we're shedding, whatever, right? Like, but we also have a telos, right?
Yeah.
That includes death.
Yeah.
So we have this story of dying and being resurrected, in minutia, like in tiny little ways. But we also have these moments in our life, in our history, where we died and we were resurrected, in the sense that some traumatic thing happened and we came out of it a different person, right?
Yeah.
Why would we think that the end of our lives wouldn't be any different than that? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why we would. Yeah. Yeah. Every night we do that in a way. We die. We go to
yes, every night. Exactly.
A little practice.
Yeah. Baptism is a death and resurrection image, right?
Yeah.
It's an image of death and resurrection. And I think it's that image because that is what we do.
Yeah.
We are literally dying, but we are also dying. Right?
I kind of want to bring something up, but I'd give away the story and I want you to read it. You should read The Golden Key because there's a part in there where
I will. I'll read it next.
Okay, it's good. It's a good one. Can you find it online? You probably know where to find those. You have Kindle.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's short. It's a short story. It's shorter than The Wise Woman for sure.
Yeah. I might even have it in here because this is a collection of. It has other stories in it. So let me look. No. Little Daylight, Cross Purposes, and The Castle, a Parable.
The Castle's good too. That one's really
Is it?
Yeah, I remember I like that one a lot. It's definitely, you can tell it's more Christian focused or Christian oriented, I guess, sort of.
Yeah.
In a way, but I remember I really liked that one. That was one of those. A lot of times I read. I don't always like. I've never really been very good reader my whole life, and so a lot of times I'll read a little bit of something, then put it down and come back to it. But I remember when I read The Castle one, I sat down and just read the whole thing straight through.
Yeah. The Light Princess, I mean, was pretty obvious to me too.
What was that one again? I vaguely remember that. I read
oh man, I can remember the end of it, and if I say, I'd give away the whole story. So
yeah.
I can't. Yeah.
I'm okay with that, but other people listening.
It's not very long. It's really short. It's really short.
Okay.
It's not a book. It's just a short story.
Mhm.
So yeah. Yeah, The
Yeah.
Golden Key. Yeah, it's good. I'll read that.
Yeah, I think you'll like that one. I actually did a YouTube video with my cousin John. We talked about it. Um, and so there's definitely spoilers on that, but we were just um, trying to explore the story. But I think that's my favorite of his short stories. I think, but Phantastes is like you said, that's just the one that I don't know, something about that book that just really tugs at your heart. And every chapter is like almost every chapter is like new and
Its own story. It's almost like its own story. I was reading like an analysis of it, and apparently they call it the black box of like fairy tales, because there's so many conflicting ideas about what it is. Many people think that it's a number of short stories just all smashed together, but
could be. He's got
but they're finding out that that's not what it is. And I mean, there is a story in the story of Cosmos, which is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah,
it's so incredible.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, yeah. That's what I was thinking. But that's the one where it feels like where it could be a little bit unrelated or something, but I don't think it is. Like you look at like if you
No.
piece it together, it almost feels like it's a more condensed version of the whole book or something. I don't really know how to say it.
Yeah.
I haven't
Well,
thought about it enough.
Yeah, I was going to read that critique, and then I decided to save it because I'll read it later because I want to read Phantastes a few more times.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have that in mind, you know. I don't want to have someone exegete Phantastes before I read it a few more times.
Yeah, I don't think you should either too. I was talking to my sister one time and I was like, you know, if they ever made a movie, I think they could maybe get away with making a movie of Lilith or something. But if they ever did make a movie of Phantastes, I think it would just rob it of its magic.
It would.
Yeah, because it's supposed to like make you imagine again.
It is. Yeah. And you know that Lewis said it was that book that baptized his imagination.
Yeah. I think mine has a foreword or something somewhere in there where he says that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. He has a way of doing that where it just he'll phrase something in the right way to where it just make you kind of wonder, and if you were to actually make this into a film, it would just rob it of everything, I think. But
yeah, I mean, what he packs into Phantastes from a like, I don't know, I almost think it's more than what's in Lord of the Rings. It's more, Phantastes is so much more sublime.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, like I was rereading The Wise Woman today, just looking for little pieces that I remembered and I wanted to reread them. And they were so profound to me and moving. And I found them in the book and they were like 3 sentences. And I'm like, holy crap. Like he said, he did all that with 3 sentences.
Yeah.
You know, I thought it was like half a chapter.
Yeah.
Just a little tiny bit.
Did you have a favorite part in Phantastes at all? Or?
Well, yeah, I had the little girl that was collecting the butterfly wings.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's a favorite part of mine. The little boy over which his shadow falls. Cosmos, the story of Cosmos, the whole story.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that he brings home this mirror and he hangs it up on the wall. And then in the evening, he sees a woman step into the mirror and she's using all his furniture to sit on, right? Whatever's reflected in the mirror is furnishing her room.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And she can't see him. And so he starts to show her that he's there by moving or adding things to the room that she would love. Think about that, what that is. And after a while, she starts to realize that somebody cares for her. Like, not just that somebody's out there, but this somebody actually loves her, right?
Yeah.
But she's trapped in the mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that story. Yeah. That's a good one to explore. I love that story.
You could spend hours just on that story, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think there's more packed into that than Lord. I mean, I've never read Lord of the Rings, so I guess I can't really say that, but
You haven't? Oh, you would love it.
no, I've seen the movies, and I started the first book a while back, but I haven't.
I've got a quote from the wise woman I have to read you. This is just an example. This is just an example of what he can pack into this is more than 3 sentences, but won't you give me a little flower, please, you beautiful child? There they are. They're all for you, answered the child, pointing with her outstretched arm and forefinger all around. But you told me a minute ago not to touch them. Yes, indeed I did. Well, they can't be mine if I'm not to touch them. If to call them yours, you must kill them, then they are not yours, and never, never can be yours. They are nobody's when they are dead. But you don't kill them. I don't pull them. I throw them away. I live them. How is it that you make them grow? I say, you darling, and throw it away, and there it is. Where do you get them? In my lap. I wish you would let me throw one away. Have you got any in your lap? Let me see. No, I have none. Then you can't throw one away if you haven't got one.
I don't know how he does that. And it's like, he gets across this, like, just such a profound idea in this simple little
exchange.
Story. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's just so if you don't stop to pause and think about it for a second, you could just, I mean, I would like to think it still gets in there subconsciously or something, but if you actually stop and pause and be like, what's going on here? You're just like, this is just incredible what he's doing.
I know. He's got another quote in Lilith. Let me see if I can find it. That is equally, well, I mean, there's a million of them in Lilith.
Yeah. Here's one. I just had one. If I can find it again. Oh, shoot.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because it actually, I had it highlighted. I just opened it up, and then it was where the mirror was. And he was talking about the mirror. I don't know if you find yours. Go ahead, because I love
okay. Well, I've got. Okay, he says. Your consciousness of yourself and my knowledge of you are far apart. This is Mr. Raven talking to Mr. Bean. Your consciousness of yourself and my knowledge of you are far apart. But then he says, Mr. Raven says this to Mr. Bain, in this world, never trust a person who has once deceived you. Above all, never do anything such a one may ask you to do. I will try to remember, I answered, but I may forget. Then some evil that is good for you will follow. And if I remember, some evil that is not good for you will not follow.
Yeah.
In other words, some evil that is good for you will always follow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's another part in that I remember I really liked where he said, it was when Mara was when they had with Lilith, and she said something like they were gonna have to hurt her but if they didn't hurt her enough, they would have to do it again, and it would be abuse or something like that. Yeah, and that part always stuck with me too.
Yeah, and that's the thing about George MacDonald. You know, he doesn't shy away from the consuming fire of God, right? He doesn't shy away from it.
Yeah.
At all. And so, I mean, if I had encountered universalism in any other form, I probably would have rejected it.
Same here, yeah. Because I used to say that. Because I started, and it really wasn't coming across George MacDonald. It was just reading the scriptures over and over, and then coming to these different parts, and I was like, it seems to me that I'm kind of becoming a universalist, and so I kept saying that, but then I was like, if it ever got brought up about the idea of hell, I was like, well, yeah, obviously hell's real. I'm like, it almost becomes more real to me the more I kept studying, because the consuming fire becomes more and more real, and you're, and so it's not but then you hear that, the universalism where it's just happy-go-lucky and there's no hell.
There's no consequences to your actions at all.
Yeah, and that's not what it is at all.
And this is the thing that I find interesting, because in a sense, that kind of universalism actually mirrors the idea that some people go to heaven and some people go to hell, and that's just the way it is. Because you could make the same argument that if you go to hell, or if you're going to go to hell, well, then why bother doing any good thing, right?
Yeah,
you're just going to go to hell anyway. And if you're going to go to heaven and you're sure of that, then why bother doing any good thing? You're going anyways, right? It's guaranteed. And so but with this idea of apokatastasis and the love of God as a consuming fire, it, to me, what it does for me, it's a call to holiness.
Yeah,
that's what I really sense from it. And
I completely agree. It's a calling. That's what I keep getting, that image of that Star of David in my head, where it's like everything's coming out, but it's calling at the same time. It's calling all back into this one center, into the holiness.
Yeah,
it's like everything's branching out and creating, but at the same time, it's pulling everything back into this. It is that closeness to God, that holiness, where the consuming fire keeps breaking off what's like you quoted before, love loves unto purity, or whatever that was. That was it. Here's the part I found it again though, because this was in the, I don't know, I highlighted this part. It was in the Cosmos story with the mirror, but it says, what a strange thing a mirror is, and what a wondrous affinity exists between it and man's imagination. For this room of mine, as I behold it in the glass, is the same, and yet not the same. It is not the mere representation of the room I live in, but it looks just as if I were reading about it in a story I like. All its commonness has disappeared. The mirror has lifted it out of the region of fact and into the realm of art, and the very representing of it to me has clothed with interest that which was otherwise hard and bare, just as one sees with delight upon a stage the representation of a character from which one would escape in life from something unendurably wearisome. But it is not rather that art rescues nature from the weary and sated regards of our senses and the degrading injustice of our anxious everyday life, and appealing to the imagination which dwells apart, reveals nature in some degree as she really is, and as she represents herself to the eye of the child, whose everyday life, fearless and unambiguous, meets the true import of the wonder-teeming world around him and rejoices therein without questioning. It's kind of wordy, but it's like
no, and childlikeness ends up being a part of it, and the imagination, right? But it's true. I mean, I remember reading that and thinking to myself, it's true. When you look at something in a mirror, it doesn't, it does become enchanted in a sense, right? It looks different to you when you see it. It's framed, right? And
Yeah, it lifts it. He said, what did he say, that like it lifts it into the realm of art or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Out of the realm of fact and into the realm of art.
Yeah. Yeah. I wrote a poem once about, well, I'll just read it. It's about a mirror. Whoops. See if I have it here. Okay. My eyes caught hers and she smiled at me. Then I turned away, but was drawn back to see. Her eyes so bright danced with joy as mine met, and I said hello to a secret well kept. There wasn't a day that I had not known, nor a wrinkle or freckle I hadn't seen grown. Yet I'd never noticed how brown were her eyes, how her cheekbones rose to her hair on each side. Nor had I seen such a genuine smile that spoke of her willingness for the extra mile. And I wanted to know her, to reach in somehow, for she seemed to walk higher than I know how. So I faltering smiled back, and she welcomed me, and I felt such a part of her destiny. And I told her how pretty I thought that she was, and she bit on a trembling lip and then paused. Yet turn away from me she did not, and a purity stretched out beyond my thoughts. And smiling again as embarrassment pained, eyes wide with bewilderment, I noticed again that the window she stood in reflected the light, and as I switched off my lamp, she stood in the night. That was me looking at myself in a mirror.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah. And you know, I remember thinking about that when I was reading Phantastes, this poem, because I literally didn't know who I was looking at. Like the person in the mirror was someone different than I, someone better than I, right? Yeah. Which is what George MacDonald talks about. You know, that it gets lifted into this realm of art, right? And that you see it differently, and it doesn't, yeah.
That's really good. Like
yeah.
Is that going in the book you're writing?
I don't have a book.
Well, you said earlier when we were talking that you're working on something with someone.
Oh yeah, we have a book project. No, that's not in it.
Well, you should.
It's not just my book. It's a group of people, and we're working on a little thing. Yeah.
You should do a book of poetry or something. Do a book.
I should.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that way people can pick it up, like this sort of thing.
Yeah, well,
100 years later, it's wow. Oh yeah, yeah.
I've got yours.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you like it. Yeah.
No, I was thrilled.
Sorry, go ahead.
You just the only complaint I have is you didn't sign it.
I just I didn't, because I mailed it, like I think I ordered it straight off Amazon because it was on.
Yeah.
Amazon.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well. Next time.
Next time. I could order more than maybe mail another one, but yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I haven't really done much art since then. And
did you do what's behind you on the wall?
No, that's a friend of mine, and so I'm actually at my sister and my brother-in-law's place right now because they're at the hospital. So I'm staying.
Oh, right.
But they're our friend Ruthie did that. She does abstract art, and so they bought that from her. But she's actually Ruthie. Our friends Ruthie and Craig are getting married in 2 weeks. So.
Oh wow.
That one, yeah. I like that one a lot too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I did that.
Yeah, well, you should just keep doing it, Jason, because I don't know. There's something about your art that I really love.
Oh, well, that's good. Because I went back and when I looked at it like later on, I was like, it kind of looks like a little kid did this, but I don't hate it. But I was just kind of like,
but it's charming. Like there's something about it that is a little bit like that, but a little bit not, you know? And I don't know, I really like it. I've always really liked it. So I'm glad I have this. Yeah.
Well, I thought there was some. Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask you these questions, so you don't have to answer them. I just like asking people these.
Sure.
So there's two main questions that I thought I could ask people whenever I'm in conversations with them, but because I usually end up, if I know you, I'll end up asking you at some point anyway.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite like passage in the scriptures, or favorite chapter or book, or?
Yes. I don't know the chapter and verse, but it's at the end of the love chapter in Corinthians.
Okay. The
For now we see through a glass darkly, but one day we shall know as we are known.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
That is my favorite.
Nice. That's cool. And the other one was, do you have a favorite Disney movie?
Disney? I'm not much of a Disney fan.
Really? Okay.
I kept Disney to an absolute minimum when my kids were little. Yeah. I don't know. Somebody shared some ghastly conspiracy theory stories about Disney movies with me years ago.
Oh yeah, well that's probably true.
And I just couldn't get it out of my head. I said to my husband, "Oh my God, that's just ruined my life," you know.
Yeah.
Let me think about that. Disney.
You don't have to answer. Sorry.
Jungle Book.
Really? That's my favorite too.
The first one.
Yeah.
Not the remake, but the very first Jungle Book.
The cartoon one?
Yeah.
The one with scripture in it, right?
Yeah. Does it have scripture in it?
Yeah. The one, I think Bagheera, because Baloo, when he fights Shere Khan and you think he gets killed, Bagheera, he quotes, "Greater love hath no man than this."
Oh, right.
Yeah. I know, it's a
that would be
Christian
my
film.
favorite. Well, then that settles it. Yeah. So that's your favorite.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite scripture verse then?
I don't know. I have my favorite chapter in the whole Bible is Ecclesiastes 12. But I don't know if I have a favorite verse. But that one's it's I mean, I can read it too if you want.
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about sections of the Bible, I love the creation story.
Okay. Yeah.
So what did you say? Ecclesiastes 12?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was I read that book. I still try to read, usually try to read Ecclesiastes every week. I haven't been doing that as much since this year started, but I went through a phase where I read Ecclesiastes every day for a few months, and that chapter just really has been, I don't know, formative, I guess you could say. I don't know, more than that. I don't know. It really, but it's got a verse in there, about the almond tree thing. So that's kind of
right.
Yeah, I had that was a weird thing with synchronicities. I had a few things where it's been like I've had, I guess that's what people call them, where it just keeps popping up over and over.
Yeah.
And that was another thing with the imagination that was strange, because like when my dog passed away, I remember I went home and I grabbed all her stuff, threw it in a pile and burned it, and posted like, I wish I would have kept more of her stuff. I didn't throw everything out, but it was just And then but then I posted. I didn't even say anything that she died. I just I think I posted a picture of her bed, and then I put that whole chapter of Ecclesiastes 12, and it says in there, when the almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper is a burden, and desire fails, and man goes to his eternal home. And mourners go about in the streets. And so the almond tree is like the first tree to, I think, awaken from spring. So it's kind of like, I think in Ecclesiastes, it's like this. It's weird because it's the death being life, and the same thing, because it's like the almond tree it blossoms, but I think another version says when the almond tree is despised, like when you're tired of watching, and it's like you're tired of awakening from spring.
Right. Yeah. I see.
But it's the same thing. It's kind of the same thing, but then it's the first to awaken from the death, the winter. And so I don't know, but then after that, anyway, all that to say, after that, it was, I just could not get the image out of my head. Like it was like almond tree, like just constantly in my imagination, and I
Really?
never, to where like I almost didn't have control of it. I was just thinking of it all the time, and then when I wouldn't think of it, it's like I'd be like, hey, I'll watch a sermon or something, pull up YouTube, and then the guy would start talking about an almond tree.
Oh,
What is
wow.
that? I was just like, what is that? And it was probably 2 months of that, maybe more. And then, yeah. So it was just a strange experience, but
very cool.
And then that's why I just was like, well, I'll just start using that from whatever. And that the cover of the book actually was I can't find it now. It was actually an acrylic painting, and that was the first one I ever did. My younger cousin Lily, she I had never like painted before. I had done a little art in like high school, but I'd never actually like done any painting. And she was like, "You should try it." And so she went with me to Hobby Lobby, and that was the first one I had done. So
this one,
yeah, that paint, yeah. So it was on acrylic, and I lost the actual painting though. Like,
oh no,
yeah. So luckily I had that picture of it on my phone before I lost it. So
wow.
yeah, and then I just, for the book cover, I just like threw a weird little effect over it in Photoshop to make it kind of go better. But yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so that was supposed to be an almond tree. If it looks like one, I don't know. Yeah. But so that's why I think that's
it also
that chapter has a lot of meaning for me, I
guess.
guess.
I'll read it. I'll read it.
Yeah, it's about dying, so it's not too thrilling, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I think that is thrilling because, I mean, if you find a lot of meaning to a chapter in the Bible that talks about dying, then I think you're well on your way.
Yeah. Well, that one, I feel like that chapter really almost carries the most meaning I mean, that's probably really a dumb claim to make, but it's basically, it says like, remember your creator in the days of your youth before the different.
Oh, okay, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's saying, it's kind of, I feel like helps me realign my focus of like,
absolutely. Yeah.
And then the very end of the chapter, he says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter, like the whole matter of life. And it says, fear God and keep his commandments.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that idea of fear is actually awe.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different ballgame.
I know.
And that is the enchanted world. When you are in awe of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, when you're in awe, everything rises up to God. Like Peterson talks about that. He talks about, what's it called now? Piloerection. So your hair stands on end, right?
Okay.
And you get goosebumps. Your skin stands up. Everything rises up. And I remember when he was talking about it, I thought, well, yeah, because, and that is an experience that you cannot make happen. It happens to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd never thought of that before. That's true.
Yeah, you can't, that's not a function that you have any control over at all. And it overwhelms you, right? Like, you know, when you're in awe of something, it comes over you. And then everything in you rises up to it. Yeah, that's what they're talking about there.
Yeah. And the fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I've had to be careful with that sometimes, because sometimes people have I'll say that, and some people's context for when they hear that fear is like be terrified and stuff, which I don't know. There is still within that like it is terrifying. There can be, yeah.
Well, I mean, it is a mix. It's a mingle, because I mean, if you're afraid, your hair stands on end too, right?
Yeah.
So
there's been times where that love is so awe-inspiring, like you're saying, and so holy, where you do approach it with like fear and trembling. You're like,
well, and you should, because it's just so much greater than you are, you know?
Yeah.
It's like Moses, funny. When God says, take your shoes off, buddy. Oh crap, I forgot, you know? I mean, yeah.
Well, I can let you go. Thanks for talking. I know we've been going for a while, but
Yeah, no, it was great. And we should do it again. It was really enjoyable.
yeah, I would love to. I'd love I mean, we kind of talked about Phantastes instead of the other thing, but I like that.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. But there's other stuff like I'd be wanting to ask you too if we got a chance, if you're willing to share it, because I know you have some stories and get more of your, if you're willing to share personal stories at some point, because I know you've had a lot of interesting stuff happen. I heard you made some comment one time that like and it was in some other conversation you're in where you had like you've had a lot of spiritual experiences as well. And
well, I wouldn't say I've had a lot of them. I mean, I've had some. Yeah.
Same here. Yeah.
We can swap stories. We can swap stories then. That would be fun.
That'd be good. I've been thinking about that, and with like you mentioned earlier, the people keep talking about the re-enchantment of the world and stuff, and I was like thinking like maybe it'd be good to actually share more of these stories,
that's
even if some might like to find good ones like angelic stories, even demonic stories. That way, people just kind of know what's out there as well too and stuff. But I don't know. Maybe it's not good. But anyway, I don't know. But thanks again for talking to me. Thank you. This was so much fun.
Yeah, well, I'm really honored and I'm glad. Glad that we've gotten to know each other, Jason. It's been really, really great.
Yeah, same here. I'm glad as well.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Okay. Well, you have a good night. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.